A biblical perspective on life, culture, and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Today, we are going to look at the missing link. That's right, I'm going to say it again. We are looking today at the missing link because we are going to get a unique insight into the United States, its politics, culture, and history. And this is very topical because in about half an hour from now, Donald Trump is going to be debating sitting President Joe Biden in the United States leading up to their election. But in the midst of political chaos and corruption, people of faith in America have been misled about the role of faith in America's founding and also their rights and responsibilities as American citizens. Well, our very special guest today has 20 years of political experience and a deep understanding of the history of the United States. Her husband is a former US Senator, and she lays out the true facts about the role of faith in America. She also provides a deeper understanding of the humanistic philosophies that have been targeting faith in America for the past century. And Christy Stutzman has also written a book to mobilize people of faith across America and the world, and the book is called The Spiritual Price of Political Science. And Christy Stutzman joins us from the state of Indiana right now. Christy, welcome to 2020.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be with you.
Well, we're really looking forward to this conversation. It is very topical, as I said earlier. Trump is about to debate Biden. You're in the state of Indiana. What is your feeling leading up to this election in November? Tell us what you're hearing and feeling and seeing.
Well, the feeling on the ground right now with most people is it's almost to the point where they feel like they're losing hope. And that's a sad state. And it's not usual for Americans to feel like there is no hope. But with inflation, with everything that they're facing, the costs are skyrocketing, the economy's stagnant, we're being overrun at our borders. We just feel like we're being hit on all sides. And that has made a lot of people turn back to God. We're seeing pockets of revival and spiritual renewal across the country. And usually God can use very difficult circumstances to turn people back to Him. And we're starting to see that. But the feeling on the ground politically is that people have had enough. They're ready for some type of strong leadership, and they really are they're tired of being told that we're a bad country and that we've done bad things. They know their kids, they know their community, they know what they believe and why they believe it, and they're ready to stand up for it.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say about the pride in America. When I was younger, a few of my friends became professional surfers, and when they went to California to compete, I remember one of them coming back going, those Americans are crazy. They're just so patriotic. They just love America so much. They're waving flags. And, Australians are a lot more sort of low key than that. I know Steve Irwin wasn't. You probably think we're all like Steve Irwin was, but we're actually not. We've taken some cues from our British former colonial masters.
Right.
And Americans were so patriotic. We're just talking 30, 40 years ago here. But today, like you said, there's almost this subconscious narrative that America's done something wrong. It's a bad place. It's an oppressive place. And it's so different. So much has changed in the narrative. Can you tell us how that happened?
Well, I did a lot of research on it because I had that same question. And one of the conclusions that I came to was that about 100 years ago, there were some cultural Marxists, mainly from Germany, but Eastern Europe, who were basically atheist humanists, and they decided that they were going to experiment with cultural Marxism in several different, civilizations. And when each experiment failed, they decided, we should have targeted the children first. We should have targeted them younger. And so they actually came to America around the turn of the century and started getting involved in our academics, our places of higher learning, and they started targeting the young people, trying to convince them that, they could evolve past the human existence. Actually, they wanted to be transhuman in some of their writings. And so this has permeated our academic areas for a long time, but now it's all the way down into the kindergarten level. And I don't believe America is the exception to the rule. role. I think, Western civilization has been targeted by this mentality. And it really is a mentality that is opposed to everything that we believe in with our Christian worldview. And so because it has been around so long, we are seeing the results of that. It really results in an anarchy of the mind. So that's why we're seeing demonstrations in our streets over things that really don't make sense. The demonstrators don't know what they're there for. They just want to cause. They just want to, rage against the machine. And it really is a pushback against all authority. It's not just American idealism. It is any type of authority, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's a father figure, whether it's the church, regardless of what it is, that's what they're raging against. And it's a direct result of this the churches were not combative.
Yeah, and this is for our listeners what is often termed as the march through the institutions. And as you say, Christy, this is not just limited to the United States. It's across Europe. So in countries like Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and especially in Britain. And there's almost like this deep sense of shame and embarrassment about who we are and about our culture. And I just want to, you are an American and you probably don't want to sound boastful, but I just want to remind our listeners some facts about America. In World War II, almost 200,000 young Americans, mainly males, went over to Europe and fought for the liberation of Europe. And they didn't only fight, they won, and they conquered the Germans and the Italians, and they won the war, and then they sailed home again. And in history, I'm a student of history, I've done a degree in history, there's never been a nation that has ever done that has literally sailed halfway around the world, fought a war, won the war, and not stayed and occupied and oppressed and milked that win for all they could. I mean, people could argue that, there were business interests and trade agreements, and there was, but even in Australia, Christy, you may not know this, 1 million US servicemen were based in Australia in the Second World War. 1 million US servicemen came through Australia to defend Australia against the Japanese, who at that time were threatening invasion. We only had a population of 7 million. America is, I believe, the greatest country that's ever existed since Israel under King David, with the freedoms and just the sense of destiny and wanting to help and really wanting to save the world. And it is an amazing nation, and it's so sad to see now, like you said, that through these institutions, through universities and schools and right down to the kindergarten level, that young Americans are being told that somehow you've done something wrong.
Yeah, really. It really has become an issue of, beating people down and changing the entire culture and the mentality towards not just America, but especially our faith. We have been intimidated into being silent about our faith in the public square. And that was never the intent of the founders of America. That was never the intent of, even our birthplace of freedom over in Britain. The whole idea was that people of faith would be involved and engaged in the political process, in the civic dialogue. That was the whole basis for the system of governments that they came up with. And our system of government, is unique in the history of the world. It's patterned very much after the British type of government, and it's also patterned after biblical principles and ideals that you see in the Old Testament. And so there's an element there that's missing in our culture, where we're being told that as people of faith, we're not scientific. I can't remember the last time I heard a creationist scientist on a science channel as an expert talking about something. And when we talk about our faith in the public arena, it really is becoming more and more of a battle between people of faith and people who just do not accept it. And I think what we have to realize is that this is just a battle between us versus the secular. There is an actual religion out there that is permeating and that is actually in charge sometimes in our government and in our higher education system, and that is humanism. It truly is a religion, and there are doctrines that they follow, and there's things that they believe, and so we really have this clashing of ideas, and we cannot be intimidated into being silent. It is our birthright actually to be part of the conversation and the dialogue, and if we're not at the table, we have no excuse, because we have every chance to run for office, to be involved, to speak out. We have freedom of speech. We have freedom of religion. We have freedom of the press. If we don't take advantage of it, it's on us. on us. It's on us as the people.
Yeah, and obviously, Christy, you're invested and your husband's invested. Your husband is a former U.S. Senator, and he's just, I believe, won the primary, so he's going to contest the November election to run for the Senate again. So you guys are invested, but so faith really is the missing link in America's greatness, isn't it? It's the key that really opened up so many doors in your history. It's what made your nation so different. Because I say this to people, if you look at the pyramids in Egypt, they were built thousands of years ago. And I don't know if you know this, Christy, until the Eiffel Tower was built in Paris in the 19th century, the Great Pyramid of Egypt in Gaza there was the tallest building in the world. For thousands of years, that pyramid was the tallest man-made structure in the world. The Egyptians were so sophisticated and so advanced like thousands of years ago, and they're still there. And so the question is, why isn't Egypt the world leader right now? Why isn't Egypt the greatest economy in the world? Why aren't they the leaders in technology and in culture and in politics and in science? Well, I don't want to be negative about them, but I know that they have not had a Christian faith at the heart of their politics, at the heart of their culture, and at their heart of, what they're doing as a people. And yet you guys, in just 200 years as a nation, with this Christian faith, this missing link, saw greatness. You saw the blessing of God. You saw freedom. You saw opportunity. And you saw people rising up and pursuing their dreams. And as I said, you literally saved the world twice in the 20th century in 2 world wars. And you were the bulwark against communism in Russia and then China and even now in North Korea and different nations. And faith really is that missing ingredient, isn't it? That it's the key or the secret to America's greatness.
Yeah. When you look at the people that first came to our shores, whether it's the Pilgrims or the Puritans or the Quakers or the Catholics in Maryland or the Baptists in the Carolinas, they all came here seeking religious asylum. And this was way back before we were even a nation. So it was very important to them at the founding that they protect that freedom of religion for multiple reasons. One of the reasons was that they wanted the freedom of conscience to raise their children the way they believed that God told them to be raised, to teach them, God's word the way they believed, but also because they wanted to be salt and light. When you read the writings of the Pilgrim Fathers, one of their goals was that they should be a shining light to all the world. And I was recently, well, I wasn't recently, it was probably about 7 years ago, but it seems like yesterday, I was visiting Israel and we were on a diplomatic mission. My husband was a congressman at the time, and we were able to go on a tour of the Mount of Beatitudes. And we had a tour guide, and he was from Israel. He was an Israeli citizen. He was Jewish by birth, but not practicing. And he did a great job presenting everything. And one of the things that he had us do was to read Matthew 5. So we read it, and we all got, as we read it there, right where Christ had said it. And then he asked us to read verses 14 through 16 again, where it says, "Ye are the salt of the earth. But if the salt has lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is henceforth good for nothing but to be cast out." And then he had us read, Ye are the light of the world. The city that is set in the hill cannot be hid." So we read those verses, and then he looked at us and he said, "I want you to know that as a citizen of Israel, we have watched you do this thing that Jesus said. You have been a light to the world." He said, "You have done this thing that Jesus said, but I want to ask you, please don't stop. Please don't stop." And I think, as Christians and as people of faith, we really have to take that to heart and realize that when we have an opportunity to make a difference, regardless of whether it's being involved in government and being salt and light there, or in our communities, or in our schools, or in our healthcare system, wherever we are, if we don't take advantage of that, we're going to answer someday for that. So we have a lot of responsibility, and I tell my sons and I tell younger people, when you watch those Spider-Man movies and you hear that quote by Uncle Ben who says, "With great power comes great responsibility." That's been my mantra. With great opportunity, with great power, with great, access comes great responsibility as well. And so that is our birthright. And I think, hearing him say that in Israel, that you have done this thing that Jesus said, was so encouraging. But then also to hear him say, "Please don't stop." Boy, it gave us pause. It really made us think, oh, wow, what are they seeing? They're seeing the foundations crumble, and it's on our watch. We got to do something.
Yeah, and well, it sounds like, Christy, you are doing something. You've written a book about it. Your husband's running for the Congress again. I might have said Senate before, in November. But, I also want to just mention that this Trump and Biden contest, not just the debate that's about to happen, but the election in November. What is your feeling about this contest between Biden and Trump, and what's the average Christian saying? And just before you answer, I just want to put it out there to our listeners today. You can call in and ask Christy a question. Maybe you've got a question about Donald Trump or about Joe Biden or about US politics or something you do understand or you don't understand. Maybe you love Biden. Maybe you love Trump. We don't know. We don't care. This is open to everybody, but we would love to hear from you. And you can call us on 1-800 316 316. That's 1-800 316 316. Christy is a former state legislator. Her husband is a former congressman, and he's running for the Congress again this November in a very safe conservative seat, so he'll probably win again. But Christy, what is the average Christian looking at this contest between Biden and Trump? What are they saying and what are they seeing?
Well, one of the things they're seeing is the difference in policy and how it has affected our lives. One of the things they're very thankful for, I had talked to many Christians who are looking at this contest very seriously. They're so thankful that we changed Roe versus Wade, which is the abortion law in America. So they're
just
thankful
explain
that
to
was
us, Christy,
overturned.
because some of our listeners may not be as familiar with that as others. So just explain what that is, the Roe versus Wade thing, and how it was overturned.
Yeah. In 1973, Roe versus Wade decision was passed by the U.S. Supreme Court, essentially legalizing abortion on demand. And it was never passed through a legislative process. There was not a vote taken. This was done against anything that the state legislators ever wanted to do. And it should have been a state's issue from the beginning when you look at our Constitution. So they somehow superseded not just the state legislators, but also the Congress, took it straight to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court stepped in where they shouldn't have stepped in and legalized abortion on demand. And ever since then, people of faith and people who are, supportive of life have marched on the Capitol in Washington, D.C. for 50 years. So after 50 years, I was born in 1973. So this has been my whole lifetime. I have known this fight going on in America between the pro-life and the pro-abortion people. And I tell you, the pro-life people are the most kind, generous, wonderful people, and they have been ostracized. They have been called names. They have been accused of not caring about the mother, all kinds of things. And it's just not true.
Yeah,
they have done so much for mother and child. So that's the situation. Yeah,
absolutely. But so just to explain to our listeners too, I think the Supreme Court has 5 judges on. Is it 5? And back in 73. Yeah, so back in 73, I'm guessing it was stacked with Democrat-leaning judges, and they're the ones who voted on this?
Yes, and even those who should have been conservative, there were a couple surprises there too. So it's 9 total, and it was a big disappointment. But yes, it was definitely leaning towards the liberal side. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so then what happened when Trump was in office? Obviously, the Supreme Court ended up with a majority of conservative judges. Is that correct? And that's when this Roe versus Wade was overturned?
Yes. Yes, so he nominated, I believe it was 2 or 3 judges to the bench who ended up having a case that had actually been in the process for years. So it takes a long time to get to the Supreme Court. And this case was very, very important, and it was also pretty obvious. And so when it came to the Supreme Court, it was the Supreme Court ruled to overturn Roe v. Wade and send it back to the states. So now it is back to the states. And what I keep telling people is that the fight will never be over. There will always be opposition to this, position of protecting life. And so we cannot stay silent. We have to be vigilant on the state level.
Yeah. And some have argued that, one of Trump's greatest achievements when he was the president was that the Supreme Court actually has a conservative majority and is kind of stopping some of these extremist leftist pieces of legislation being passed. Now, we've had a couple of callers, and I hope they've been patient enough to wait for that news break, and we will go to one of them now. Sandra is calling from Brisbane. Are you there, Sandra?
Yes, I am.
What would you like to talk to Christy about today?
Christy, I'm completely pro-Trump, I have to say. I was saved through Billy Graham crusade. But concerned, praise God. But I'm concerned about the coming election because I rewatched it last time. It was such a farce and so much cheating, and President Trump was put out wrongly, I believe. and he should have continued. But how will they stop all this cheating and fake voting that they had last time?
I think one of the ways we are hoping that will happen is that there will be overwhelming numbers that they just cannot compete with, even with cheating. We know there's going to be some, bad actors that are trying to do that again. Luckily, we do have some very strong Secretary of States who are in charge of the election process in the various states. That was one of the things that George Soros tried to do, was try to take over Secretary of State's offices that run the elections in each state. And so we have had an effort here in America to take those offices back and to reclaim protection over those elections. So I know of multiple states that have done that. They have reworked their electoral process. Even here in Indiana, we have a new process, and we have double, accountability measures in place. But we know that it only is going to take a few places in large cities for them to cheat. And so what we're hoping is that there's going to be overwhelming numbers that they just cannot overcome. And we're even seeing numbers in places that are heavily Democrat, like Detroit, other places, other big cities that are starting to swing widely. Even over in Chicago, we just got numbers today where we are used to seeing the other way around. The numbers are swinging in the double digits towards Trump, and it really, I think, has to do with the economy and with how people are just set up with how terrible the economy is, and also the border is being overrun. They feel like they're not secure, and so there's a lot of people that are swinging towards Trump here towards the end, and I think you'll see that continue.
Okay. Oh, that's reassuring. I'm glad. Thank you.
Sandra, can I ask you a question? What year were you saved in the Billy Graham crusade?
Must have been 72, was it? Maybe when he was here in 72, 73. It was in Brisbane. I should have to count back.
Amazing. What an incredible legacy. So now you're a Jesus follower and a conservative leaning fan of American politics. But Sandra, I want to thank you so much for calling in today. God bless you, and thanks for joining the program.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.
Christy, you may not know this, but in Australia for years they used to say, if you say in a Bible college setting, raise your hand if you were saved in a Billy Graham crusade. There was always at least one hand in Australian Bible college for many, many years of people that had been saved in one of his crusades. So he had a big impact out here. He was a man for his times, wasn't he? I mean, after World War II, America had saved the world, and I know when he went through Europe, the Europeans embraced him. I think he preached in Wembley Stadium in London for 6 weeks straight, every night for 6 weeks, and the English could not get enough of him. I know he was entertained by the Queen, and I know he went in and he saw Winston Churchill privately, and he never talked about what they spoke about, but I'd like to believe that Churchill got saved in that meeting, and he was a great man, wasn't he?
Yeah, well, knowing Billy Graham, if he met with Winston Churchill, Winston Churchill heard it, at least. He wouldn't hold back. He'd share it.
He got a good dose of the gospel, that's for sure. And we've got a couple other callers, and I want to thank people for calling in today. And the lines are still open on 1-800-316-316. We're going to see if Richard is still there. Richard from Austinville, New South Wales.
Yep. Yeah, hello, guys. Just had a question about Donald Trump. Like, you hear a lot from the mainstream media about how Trump's a colourful character. He's had a colourful past, but when I hear him, I don't hear this narrative the mainstream media make. Oh, he's corrupt and he's evil and he's this and he's that. How do Americans perceive him as whole? Because you hear different things.
That's a really good question, Richard. Christy, how does the average American perceive Donald Trump today?
Well, they view Donald Trump as a typical New Yorker, first of all. Second of all, they see him as a very successful businessman. But I've heard a lot of people say, we're not electing a pastor. We're not electing a church leader. We're electing a leader for our country, and we're electing a leader for the world to make a statement, to the world of where we stand, and all the things that Trump did. I mean, the long checklist that he did. That's what people are looking at. They're looking at his record, what the economy was like under him, that he moved our embassy, to Jerusalem, that he helped to overturn Roe v. Wade, which was the abortion law in America. There were so many good things that he did in a short amount of time. So they look at him as kind of, braggadocious. They kind of chuckle at some of the things he says. It's kind of over the top. But when they look at his record, it's hard to argue with his record. And it also has impacted our lives. I mean, on a daily basis, our groceries costs are going up, gas prices are sky high. So all of that is a factor when they look at Trump versus Biden. And we're starting to see a big swing here towards Trump.
There you go. That's a very good answer. Rich, have you got another question or comment for Christy today?
Just one question. With I hear it a lot, like it happens in the Australian narrative, that the left is trying to steal a lot of the conservative and Christian values and a lot of the other values. And you said that a lot with Trump, and now they're trying to create this narrative that Trump gets in, he's going to drive up debt and destroy everything again. And take away from, they're so afraid of him taking away from the renewables and anything that's going to work. They don't really want it if it doesn't meet the narrative. How do you see that playing out with debt and things like that?
Like his economic management, Christy, he's asking, how do you see Trump managing the economy if he gets back into office?
Yeah. Well, we do see a lot of very fiscal conservatives, fiscal hawks being elected to Congress in the last two elections. I think they're going to hold his feet to the fire when it comes to that. But he's a businessman. He understands how that works. I think there was a lot of frustration with his spending the first time around. But in his mentality, you have to spend in order to, make things better, and then you can whatever. But there's definitely a mentality right now that we're not just at a crossroads, we're at a cliff. And so we're going to have to take some pretty drastic measures and make some pretty hard decisions fiscally in order to get our house in order, because the house is on fire. We gotta put the fire out. So Trump is definitely listening to the new Speaker of the House. He's working with him well already. The communications are very good, and so we're hoping that this new crop of congressmen and maybe even senators, we'll see. I'm a little prejudiced towards the House versus the Senate, but I really think that there's going to be some fiscal hawks there that are at the table budgetarily saying this has to stop, and we have to be smart, and we have to think about the future.
There you go. Hey, Richard, I want to thank you for your call today. We've got another caller on the line there waiting, but thanks for joining 2020 today. Okay, we've got another caller, Mike from Tasmania again. Mike, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good morning.
Have you got a question or a comment today?
Oh, just a comment. I watched Mr. Trump speak from the Oval Office on Good Friday in his presidency, and amongst, he's with a whole bunch of reverends, and he said, "This is Good Friday on which we celebrate, the death of our Lord and Saviour, Jesus Christ," or something like that. And my point is that God says, "I will honour those who honour me." He's not the Archbishop, but he honours God.
You got a comment there, Christy, in response to that?
Yes, Trump has been one of the most vocal presidents in my recollection, other than President Reagan or George W. Bush, about things of faith, and we've really appreciated that about him. Now he can be very colorful with his language as well, and so there's another side to that. But he is definitely one of the presidents that in my lifetime that has been so vocal and supportive of people of faith, of the Christian faith. He's been outspoken about that, and so that's something that we're all taking into consideration as we make this decision. But it definitely is something that we're thankful for.
Yeah, and Mike, I want to thank you for your call. There's more people trying to call in, so we want to get to those callers as well. But thank you for your comment. Mike from Tasmania. Christy will be in your state next year sometimes, Mike. Look out for that. But thanks for joining us on 2020 today, Mike.
Thanks, bye.
And we have Rosemary calling from WA, which is Western Australia, Christy. And just so you know, where I live in Australia, if I get on a plane, it takes me about 5 hours to fly to Western Australia to go and visit our friends over in the far west of Australia. It's a very large continent, but we have about the population of Texas, only about 27 million people. So lots of space, lots of fresh air and sunshine. But Rosemary is joining us from Western Australia now. Rosemary, have you got a question or a comment for Christy today?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I've been listening to the interview and Christy's comments while I've driven home from night duty. I'm a nurse. And I was just wondering about Trump, his character and behaviour over time hasn't really been, I suppose, Christian, if you want to put it that way, or displaying the fruits of the Spirit. And I understand that it seems that the Christian Americans are backing him because of his conservative views. But I'm just wondering about how, doesn't that concern the Christians in America, the fact that he doesn't actually display Christian behaviour, and also the risk of him making decisions that could actually affect different parts of the world and, I suppose, politically, and it could threaten peace in different parts of the world if he makes erratic decisions.
Yep. Militarily, yeah. Well, let's stop there because these are two really good questions, Rosemary, and I want you to hold on and listen to Christy. Mm-hmm. Christy, let's address the first one because it's a really good question. How does a Christian reconcile Trump's past? I mean, there's obviously, court cases involving affairs with porn stars and different things he's done with a professed Christian faith now. Christy, how do you reconcile that?
Yeah, so one of the things that we really struggled with, especially in the first election, was that very thing. Mm-hmm. His personal history and what everybody knew about him. He's definitely rough around the edges. He's definitely a New York style, just kind of barren, I guess, if you want to call him that. But he was definitely not the first choice in a lot of different places because of that very thing. But one of the things that I saw with Mike Pence as his vice president, with a lot of people that were around him, I saw him very much influenced by those people. And I think there is an influence on him from a pastor in Florida, actually. And I'm one that believes in second chances. I'm one that believes in that no one is beyond, saving. And I truly believe, and I know this for a fact, that this pastor has been very influential in Donald Trump's life, especially in the last 20 years. So there's definitely Christian influence around him, whether, the first part of his life and, the first half of his life maybe was pretty rough and it was on display for the world. In recent history, we've seen a change in his approach. Now, I'm not saying he's perfect, and I'm not saying, he doesn't have problems. He does. But I think there's enough good influence around him to where he, over the years, has started to listen and started to be influenced by that. I'm praying that he knows the Lord and that he will come to know the Lord if he doesn't. But I think right now we're at a crossroads to where he seems to be the candidate who can lead us in the right direction as far as getting rid of the corruption that is in Washington. And we might just need that New York rough around the edges type of approach in order to take this out by the roots that's happening in D.C. because there are really bad influences happening. There's a lot of corruption there that needs to be cleaned out. And now that he knows who is who and has had a little bit of experience, he's going in with his eyes wide open this time as to who to trust and who not to trust. Gee, that's such a good answer, Christy. And Rosemary, I want to come back to you very shortly. But Christy, would it be fair to say too, because what the impression I get is that Trump wasn't a Christian, 20, 30 years ago when these things happened, but that it looks like he found a faith in the last few years. Is that, and a conversion experience, is that sort of your perception as well? Well, it seems like he has mellowed, and I know the pastor down in Florida at the church where he attends, and they preach the word, and Trump and Melania attend regularly, from what I understand, and have friends who go to that church as well. So I think he is searching if not having found something. And so that's my prayer and my husband's prayer, is that there's enough influence around him that he does come to know the Lord if he doesn't. But there seems to be a change in his persona and in his approach to life, maybe a mellowing, maybe a being more wise about things, but he definitely has shown defense of the Christian faith. He has definitely shown defense of Israel. He's been very clear on those things. And I can't remember, in recent history, a president who has been stronger on those issues, whether his personal issues are, true or false or whatever. It's hard to believe in the media, but I do believe that there has been somewhat of a change in the last 20 years.
Yeah, and Rosemary's second question is also a really good one, because a lot of people say this, and our media say this a lot as well. Is Trump fit for the office of president? And, the old cliche, the president carries a football around with the nuclear buttons in it. I mean, is he the guy that the world can trust, that he won't lead us into a war based on some erratic decision or some whim or some personal agenda? And it is a question that many people ask today, Christy, so I'd love you to answer that question. Is he fit for the office?
When he was first running in this first primary, I was privileged to sit in a room with 10 people with President Trump. He wasn't the president at the time, but he sat down, and I was amazed at how he went through the entire room, 10 to 12 people, greeted each one, wanted to hear from each one. He really ran it like a CEO, and he wanted to hear for each person's perspective. He listened very carefully. He asked intelligent questions. He was very attentive. He also pulled my husband aside, who was a sitting congressman at the time, and asked him point blank, "What do you think of Mike Pence? I need the truth. I need to know, what type of person is he? What can I expect?" So he was very diligent in what he was doing and researching. So from a personal perspective, I was very impressed with that interaction with Trump. I think right now there's a lot of hype in the media about him. And for a man to go through a court case the way he has, multiple court cases, and just the unbelievable things that they're doing to him, things that you would not expect to happen in America. You would expect it to happen in a banana republic somewhere, somewhere where there's no law and order. But right now they're using political things to go against him, and he has really kept his cool about everything. Now, I'm sure behind the scenes he's let it fly what he really feels. But in public, he's been very disciplined in what he's saying and how he's handling it. He's being very respectful of the process, even though it's ridiculous, but is trying to tell the truth at the same time. I've never seen someone be put in this position. Personally, my husband has been through a Senate race, which is a national race here in America anymore, because there's only, so many senators, 100 senators for the whole country. And I remember waking up to newspaper articles about my husband, completely false, complete lies. And they didn't care that they were lies. They just put them out there, and they tried this. Whatever stuck to the wall, that's what they went with. And it was devastating to my husband and I. It was just unbelievable what they could do, and just to tear down someone's reputation very, very quickly. So the media is out to get him. Of course, the opposing side is out to get him. And I think through all of this, I've been very impressed with his measured response, with his careful choice of his words, but also his very honest, presentation to the media as to what's happening. So it's very, very encouraging to me as an American to see that response. I can't imagine going through it the way he has.
Jill, that's a good answer. Rosemary, does that answer your two questions?
Yes, it's really good to hear an insight. I suppose having had more contact with him that you've had, so that's reassuring.
Yeah. Hey, Rosemary, we really appreciate you calling in today, and thanks for joining us in 2020. I don't think this is Christy's last visit on 2020. I think she's going to become a regular guest now, because I'm really enjoying this today, and I know our listeners are as well. But Christy, they say, like all good things, it's got to come to an end, and we are going to have to bring this conversation to a close. But I just want to remind our listeners that you've written a book, and it's called The Spiritual Price of Political Silence, and it's all about faith in America, America's history, and what God has done. And if you want to find this book, go to the www.booksbychristy.org website. That's booksbychristy, CHRISTY.org. Christy, have you got any final thoughts for us today before we end this conversation?
Well, I'll tell you, I really enjoyed just talking to you and the people in Australia, the Aussies, and the land down under. I tell you what, it's just a big privilege and an honor to talk to you. And thank you so much for your Christian faith, for being out there, speaking boldly. And I love your accents, by the way. It's my favorite accent of all.
Well, you're amongst friends here, Christy, and we definitely will get you back again. Thank you so much for your time. Just reminding everyone, Christy has written a book called The Spiritual Price of Political Silence, and you can find that on Books by Christy, CHRISTY.org. Christy Stutzman, thank you, and God bless you, and have a good night tonight.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.